Thank you. Thank you, guys. I am the one sitting in the taxi quarreling with Stefan Larsson, if anyone asked that before. So don't ever quarrel with me, your world will explode. Actually, mine was the world exploded talking to Stefan. He does it all the time. So I'm going to take you on a little mind game here, picking up some of the threads from Jonas and John and Ben and Stefan. Imagine you were the owner of this building. And imagine that you also had a digital representation of that very same building, where all the functions, all the areas, and all the equipment had a digital representation, a BIM object. And that BIM object held the connection to all documentation, all information that you ever will need in order to run and operate that building. What would you do with that? Maybe you would use that to create new services, apps on iPhones or whatever, in order to enhance the living and working in that building for your customers and for your users. Maybe they can use these for book common resources, rooms, carpools, laundry rooms, equipment, or use these apps to send error messages to the maintenance personnel, or control their equipment in their apartments, turning on daylight lights and heat, etc. Or maybe you can use that digital twin as a framework for a super efficient maintenance organization, where the personnel in beforehand can get acquainted with the building and the rooms where they're going to support. Just as Jonas showed you, you can have a 3D model showing all the equipment so you know exactly how it will look when you get there. And before, you can get all the information of that equipment that needs to be changed. And being there, you can also find the same information, of course. And when you're done, you can upload your service report, and directly it will be visible to everyone else included in this maintenance circle. Or maybe, just like Ben showed you before, you could use this digital twin as a framework to gain a completely new level of control and understanding how your building is operating, how all your assets and functions are getting along. That means that you could plan and manage your operations in a new way, in a better level perhaps. Take a look at this. Stefan was showing a little bit of this before. This is a small clip from our research and developers department showing how you can overlay scanned reality models with different kind of BIM models from systems like Revit and ArchiCAD. And you can present it on any device, just like Stefan was talking to. You're not limited into Revit or ArchiCAD. You can present the same information on an iPad, as in this case, or in a VR environment. If you could do this, wouldn't you like to start to have strategies for that? You know, when you're designing a building using digital tools like ArchiCAD and Revit, etc., BIM-enabled modern CAD platforms, you get a lot of understanding of the things you would have a need for when the building is built, just like John was talking about. These are just but a few of the facts that you actually know when you're designing a building using BIM. These are information snippets that we are throwing in the digital dustbin today, in most cases. These have a value, and you need to have this information in order to operate and maintain that building, right? So today, in most cases, you are reinvestigating the building after it has been built. Someone is actually walking the rounds with a trolley and a binder and writing things down. This is one of these. This is one of that. If you're lucky, he or she is working on an Excel spreadsheet. You had it already in the design model and you threw it away. We did a little bit of a research about this. In UK and US, this guy, it's a guy, is named George in 85% of all the cases, and he's going to retire in 5 years. Maybe we should relieve him on that service. It's very hard to find new Georges. Not among the millennials, we won't find them. So, if we add to this the layer of Internet of Things that Jonas was a little bit talking about, imagine that all the equipment is also going to send and receive data. And with Internet of Things, we are not only talking about sensors, we're talking about everything. Windows will have the ability to communicate if they are humid or opened or closed. Doors the same. Walls will have the ability to censor if there are humidity in the walls or mold. If it's a modern building, it probably gets moldy within 6 months, right? If we can connect that to our operations, this vast amount of streaming data, we can actually start to enhance our operations even more. And the BIM models store the geometric information of that device that is reporting its data, and it also holds the connectivity to that very same device. That means that we can track and optimize energy consumptions, operations, security, anything. We need to build that into the BIM models that we are projecting. So, how would you do such a digital twin? What are the options? And thank you, John and Jonas. You already ruined the next slides, but I can live with that. So, of course, you can use a modern CAD and BIM design software. You can use Revit, you can use ArchiCAD, you can use a lot of applications to design a digital twin already ready for the BIM lifecycle. If you are doing this utilizing the BIMobject vast catalog, then it's right from the beginning. Then it's already ready to become that digital copy of the physical model that is being designed, of course. Or, as you saw in Jonas' presentation and in Ben's presentation, you can actually shortcut that process, especially if it's a ready existing building. Up until very recently, it was and we can connect that 3D scan to the very same BIM database that is the BIMobject cloud, or the mighty Hercules cloud, which some of you have heard about. And that means you can start to create digital assets with these so-called points of interest. And what Ben was showing you before is that this is not only some kind of reference, cool 3D stuff. Actually, you can start to count these references. You can create lists of these equipments. And as Stefan was showing you initially today, we are moving towards machine learning here. All these companies providing this kind of technology, they also are researching the ability to identify objects in beforehand. right? I get it. This is a light fixture A. Do you want me to look for more in this building or in all of your other buildings, sir? Yes, please. We're just 1 or 2 years away from this. Just as a bonus, these kind of 3D scanned environment, they also allows the users to do measurement, comments, and link to media, like YouTube clips or whatever. And the only thing you need is a common web browser. Just any computer will do, or a smartphone or whatever. This technology didn't exist a year and a half ago, and it's already breaking the rules, and we will see many more similar technologies. And just for a reminder, of course you can export to plan views or 3D point clouds and insert those into Revit and ArchiCAD to use them as a backdrop to create a fully fledged BIM models. This is very, very interesting, and it also shows that technology will take big leaps, and we want to embrace that. So, imagine again you were the owner of this house, and now you're planning to build a new one. What do you need to demand so that you can get a good, solid delivery of a digital twin? Well, maybe this is one of the most important parts. We need transparency. We need the ability for every stakeholder to get insight in real time, and to add to this, to communicate with all the other stakeholders. Whether it's an architect or an owner or about procurement or whatever, we need to optimize the flow of information between people. Now I forgot which bottle was mine. I take a new one, sorry. Sorry for that. So this is the BIM supply that both Stefan and Ben was talking about. This is just a really good example of a platform where you actually can do exactly this. In real time, every stakeholder can just enter the web page and look, examine, do statistics, and communicate. And you don't have to learn Revit. You only need to learn like 10 buttons. Are there too many? You can remove them as well. So this kind of online logistic perspective on the building process will give you transparency and insight. I would touch a little bit upon what John was talking about. When you're talking about assemblies, I am an architect, so I may say this. We, as an architect, we tend to want to redesign everything from scratch every time. All wheels are reinvented every time you're building a new car. When I worked as an architect, I quarreled with some of my colleagues saying, you don't have to think about where to put the toilet paper holder every time you're designing a toilet, do you? And they might argue, well, that's also architecture. It's also part of the design process. But hey, how many toilets are there out there? 10? 5? If we could try to think inside the box for once, if we could start to create libraries of assemblies, just as GAFCON are doing, then we could speed up parts of the design process. Not every time, but many times. So we can work with modules that already are good and defined. And if we reinvent new modules, then we can use them back again. And this online catalog of BIMobject and Hercules is very suitable to collect this kind of modules. So we can speed up the boring parts of the designs, and then we can focus more on the innovative part of the design. But we need to break out of this traditional thought process. If we do, we might be able to call this building market an industry. What? Did he say this is not an industry? No, you might actually argue that we are not an industry. We are a very big handicraft business. This is a building site just a few hundred meters from here. It looks like any building site you will find on any place in the world. Actually, it's pretty similar to any building site you could see 200 years ago. Nothing has changed, not much. There are electrical cranes, but still you will find a very confused guy going across the building site with a bunch of rebar over his shoulders, meeting a similar confused guy with a bunch of bricks. We don't build buildings, we carry them on our shoulders. So, John was showing that the building industry actually is the only industry in the world that is losing quality and revenues and what have you. And maybe it's because of this. The building so-called industry is the second least digitized industry in the world. According to several investigations, this is from McKinsey. The only one which is worse is the international food production. So we are competing with a farmer in Sri Lanka with 2 oxes. That's a competition we're up to. Sorry for exaggerating a bit, but so let's look into the fact, what is an industry then? An industry is based on standardized components. Do we use standardized components in this industry? Yes, we do, in fact, don't we? We know exactly how long a nail is, and we use the inch systems, and beams are these sizes, and drywalls are made of gypsum boards with defined standardized components. Good. They tend to be different from country to country, but they are still standardized. An industry is also built upon standardized processes. And when it comes to erect buildings, I don't think so. Every building is a prototype, good enough. Every building nowadays is a bespoke thing, but the processes between the actors is nowadays worse than it was in the 70s and the 80s. And I have a theory why I'm coming there. An industry is highly effective. Is the building industry highly effective? I agree with John. It's poorly, ineffectively. It's a disaster. An industry is also highly mechanized. Is the building industry mechanized? Yeah, somewhat. We do have cranes, and we do have electrical power drills. Still, we're carrying rebars on our shoulders. And an industry is highly digitized, nowadays at least. And this industry, on the building site, is not. So we need to change how we look upon what is digitized. I might argue that we think that if we buy computers and software, yeah, we are digitized. That's to become computerized. And the worst thing that happened to the building industry in the 90s was that we bought computers. AutoCAD was a disaster for the efficiency of this industry, because we tried to make the same processes with the computers. And then someone told us the computers will be so effective, so we don't need to rehire people going into pensions. And we don't need to change the way we're working. That's exactly what we need to do. If we think computerization is just a tool to do things the same thing but just on a screen, then we are wrong. Digitization is changing your process. The change management Jonas was talking about on ICA, well aware of the power of the computers and having a good understanding strategically where we might be going. That's digitization, and that's where really cool stuff is going to start. Take a look at this guy down to the right. He works at the a concrete prefab company outside Amsterdam. The company is called 4by. He is the superstar of that company. They are making prefab elements. He used to have 250 colleagues. Now there are 40. But he pours the concretes into the slab. And they couldn't replace him with robots. It's too hard. Needs too much of an artisan skill. Everything else is robots and machinery. And they are super efficient. Before they digitized their process, they needed 5 to 7 weeks in beforehand to get the drawings, to plan and build the shapes, the molds. Now they need 3 hours and a Revit model. The pictures on the top is from just one of the examples of a Swedish small house timber frame prefab company. We have multiple of these. This company is called Myresjöhus. They have been using high-quality German robotics called Ramdeck-Maschine for 30 years. They too only need a Revit model and a few hours to start production. And both of these companies and many others, and you're going to listen to a few others later on this day, they say that when we are digitizing the production, it doesn't matter if I do 200 exactly alike shapes for a prefab element or if they are all unique. Cost the same. If we add to this 3D printing, and you will hear from Dag talking about 3D printing for Nordan windows and doors later this day, the possibilities are exploding. And it would not cost more to have complex architecture than just square boxes. So, back to the owner again of the house. If you were the owner of this house, what do you need to demand to get that solid digital twin? Well, you need to demand how this information should be structured, the data structures. But this is not only true for the owners. Every stakeholder, architects and constructors, manufacturers, we all have interests in how the data is structured during the BIM process, and we all need to communicate with each other. I think Jonas also had a good example from ICA, where he was talking about with the manufacturers of data, and they were asking them back and forth. We need to do that communication. Because just as John showed us, if we can get a well-planned, well-defined data delivery, that will actually increase the value of the building itself. Imagine that. Some people says that if we have a good facility management organization, the delivery of a digital building will be just as valuable as the cost of producing the physical building it represents. Let that sink in. That value is not something, it's not a saving. It's new money. It's free money. It's already here. Even if it's just a tenth of the value of the physical building, it's still huge. So, finally, what will all this mean? This shift in process that we call the digitalization, what does it really mean for all the stakeholders, building owners and the contractors, architects, engineers, manufacturers, you and I? What does it mean, really? And, well, remember this guy? If you didn't have a fax machine in the late 80s, early 90s, you were out. Everyone was demanding you to send over information, contracts, paper, everything should be on fax. I've been cutting up big paper drawings and send them in to the fax machine and get awful result on the back end. But they demanded that. You needed the fax machine just to compete. If you didn't have the ability to send over prices to the requestee, then, well, you didn't get the order, did you? A few years later, just as we started to use CAD, we got email. So we sent DWGs on email and then PDFs on email and the same thing. Now we are entering into a new age where we actually are going to change everything, because we are connecting, not only exchanging a little bit of information, but we are connecting this information into a wider flow of information. And the owners are starting to make demands. You heard about UK, you will hear more about it after lunch. They are governmental requirements of data deliveries. And we see that everywhere we go, from countries to organizations to private companies, they are demanding better and better digital deliveries. Architects and engineers, they are following that. They are utilizing it and realizing it, that if we get good BIM material, we can do better designs, we can do better analysis, we can drive the design forward. So BIM actually now can enhance the quality of everything during the entire lifespan of a building. And soon, for those of you who are manufacturers out here, everyone, of course, will have their products on a digital catalog. Of course, that will be official requirements, but the quality of the data connected to that product will be one of the most important part. If I am, as an architect, are looking for a window with specific qualities, if some of the manufacturers of windows do not provide me with the data, but just the downloadable Revit object, then I'm probably not going to select those. So the quality of the data will be very important. And if I, as an owner, receives a poorly built architectural model in ArchiCAD, next time I'm going to pick another architecture office, because the digital building will be just as valuable for me as the physical building. And finally, just you being here at BIMobject Live makes you forerunners. You are already in the forefront. You have already realized this. You are all on the digital transformation that we all need to do together to become an industry again. So when you're mingling today and tomorrow, reflect on that kind of demands that you will see on your services and your products, and also reflect upon the demands you will have on other stakeholders in the building process that you will meet. And this is a really good forum to do that. And together we will driving this industry forward. We will be the bearers of the torch of a digitalization and rebirth of a building industry. Thank you.